Hi, I'm Ray Novak, N9JA, with today's episode of Radios in Action, Amateur Radio. I'm here today with
Hi, I'm Desiree Backus, N3DEZ.
Desiree. Have you been in ham radio very long?
A couple of years, yes, but not as long as most people in amateur radio.
With things that you and I've talked about, you've made a comment of being fairly new in amateur radio, but you've been technically curious for a long time, haven't you?
Absolutely. I've worked in the IT field, supported IT for about the last 16 years. And so I've gotten to be exposed to a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah, definitely.
Just IT?
Mainly in IT, also business administration, doing PowerPoints and, things like that.
When did you start dismantling things? Because you were curious on how it worked. Or maybe you never did that.
I didn't. It was actually my son that did, and I had to become curious on how to fix things when he dismantled them as a single mom. So it was, encouraging them in their pathway forward and finding avenues for them to expose them and then learning with them side by side that kept me very in the technical fields, whether that was doing the robotics teams or learning how to code or playing with Raspberry.
Desiree, you and I've known each other for a little while, and you've shared with me some of your stories about getting into different career paths. But what really got you into technology?
I was a single mom with 3 boys, and I wanted to expose them, like most parents do, to a lot of different opportunities. And I had a couple of them that really latched onto the tech world. So I went through learning about IT with them, with the robotics teams and coding and doing some Raspberry Pi or DIY builds. And so that's just kind of how it all started, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Well, I remember my childhood and my skills of building things came after years of destroying things. Was that like it at your house?
Absolutely. Especially my eldest. He was constantly taking electronics outside in the backyard with all of my tools. And then when I would need a tool, I'd be like, what happened to that? And I'd have to go and find it. And so trying to figure out how to put things back together between the two of us, it was a lot of that, tearing things apart to rebuild them, to try to make them work again. Sometimes we were successful, other times we weren't, but it was always fun.
Yeah, I had 5 boys, and we had the saying at the house, if it wasn't broke, it wasn't ours. So we had to make sure we returned things before it became ours and was broken because they were trying to figure out what made it work.
Absolutely.
So you got brought into technology. Were you screaming and kicking, or were you joyfully going along with it?
Absolutely. I love it. I have been kind of pulled into it, but I started working and supporting the IT organization at NASA Dryden Flight Research Center, and so worked really closely with the CIO and
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Wait a minute, wait a minute. You were supporting IT with whom?
with NASA Dryden Flight Research Center in the Mojave Desert.
Oh my goodness! So you were doing IT for rocket scientists?
Well, I wasn't. I was supporting them. Yes. So managing their meetings, scheduling, working with IT security, and our all of the entire team. And so that's kind of how I was really exposed to the whole geek culture and really got into tech and had all these resources and great mentors. And so it was wonderful.
Well, thank you for using that term geek gently there. It is kind of interesting going through that kind of industry, and then later in life you discovered amateur radio.
Absolutely. So actually, we had been transferred from, my husband and I had been transferred from the NASA Dryden Flight Research Center up to NASA Ames. And because we were in a different area, I didn't know what the resources were around me. And my oldest son had just joined the Marine Corps. And so he was kind of always the one that we kind of fell back on if anything should happen. The 2 younger boys would just rely on their older brother. But with him being gone, I wanted to get into CERT, which is our community emergency response team up there in the Bay Area. And they had one day during that training for amateur radio. And I had volunteered that day to be the scribe for my team. And one of the wonderful leaders up there, Sam Palmisano, he said, "No, you're gonna man the radio." And I was like, "No, I don't do that. I'm great at taking notes. I'm gonna do that." And he's like, "No, you're gonna do the radio." And so he put the radio in my hand, kind of voluntold. And of course, I ran with it. And then I loved it so much I didn't want to let it down. And so it was really, really awesome. The CERT team was really great up there. They were just very instrumental in connecting us with the amateur radio group there in the area. And we were able to go to the next month, I went to field day. And I actually snuck away from the house and went to field day by myself because I wasn't sure that I was going to kind of let everybody else know what was going on. And that group of people just became our extended family instantly. One of the sons of one of our close friends now, he got me on the radio. Here was this kid in high school that was on the GOTA station, and he was getting me on the air and teaching me how to do it. And I stayed there the entire day. And so it was very, very fun. Then, I got my first radio and they helped me program it. And then a couple months later, my husband got into it. Obviously, he's in IT, and it's been snowballing ever since. So that's kind of how we got into ham radio.
It sounds like there's a little passion in your voice when you tell that story.
Absolutely.
So you've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It's the community and it's the tech, right? So it's the culmination of both that really makes amateur radio so great. It's the people and the connection and the extended family. Here we were in this new environment that we didn't have family around us, and trying to figure out what our resources were, how we were going to navigate this new system. And these people it was like, "Oh, well, welcome to the family," and just bring you right in. And so that, I think, has never left me. That's something that I'm constantly, grabbing people and being like, "Oh, you have no idea how wonderful this is. Come to us." And so, yeah, absolutely. Very, very passionate about amateur radio.
You mentioned field day, and one of the funny things about it is I know a lot of people love field day. What I don't know is, do they love field day because of setting up the antennas, operating the radios, or is it for the food that you have because it becomes a big fellowship event?
Absolutely. So I think it's, for different people at different times in your amateur radio career or journey, that it's different things, different years, right? And so at least it has been for me. I love getting out there and getting the entire, a big group of people getting up all their antennas out, and, people stopping and being like, "What's going on over there? What are you guys doing?" And so that is a blast to me. Also thinking about, how different people have different adaptive tools that make their setup easier. And so it's like, "Oh, I really like that. I'm going to steal that idea." Or, "Oh, that's really cool." We had a kite winder, deployment for putting out the lead lines on, our one of our antennas, and man, it just went like wildfire. So one of the guys that had done this, he ended up doing an entire, setup DIY day for all of us, and we all made our own. And so now we all have, a zillion of them, and it's a blast. But it makes it so much easier to pack up, to deploy, and everything else. So I mean, just a lot of fun.
So I mentioned earlier that your passion for this hobby has just grown exponentially. What are you doing with that passion? Are you sharing it with others, or are you just hoarding it away?
Absolutely not. So, actually, when I first got into it, I found out that NASA at each of our centers has an amateur radio group. And so that's kind of where I really kind of got started with, spreading the word. And so at first it was just within NASA at our NASA Ames Center, and I would reach out to all of our interns. What I found out, another wonderful resource for spreading the love of amateur radio, was already the engineers that were building the CubeSats and doing all those fun things. It's like they spent 10 years, building their baby and getting it to launch. And then as soon as you launch it, it's like gone. And there's like this lost child that you sent off to college kind of feeling for them. And once I could show them that, hey, you can still follow them through amateur radio, come over to the our side, and a lot of them got their licenses, and so we ended up getting our VEs and setting that up, and outreach for all of our club presentations and things like that around the center. And then it kind of grew from there, because then all of a sudden we had people at NASA that were like, oh, I'm really heavily into supporting the Girl Scouts. Can we do a Girl Scout to Girl Scout troop? And it's like, we can do that. Let's get, all of our centers to do that. And so it was like, how does that, it just kind of spread. And then all of a sudden in 2022, they asked me to lead our NASA on the air, which is like our parks on the air or summits on the air. It's all the on the air things. But Rob Suggs had started NASA on the Air back in 2018. And so in 2022, they asked if I would run it for that year. And so I was a co-chair, and we managed that for all of the centers and all of our contacts. And that was where I really connected the public to NASA and all of our current milestones and our past milestones, and what we were going to be looking forward to in the future. And so that was a wonderful opportunity of getting just stuck in the middle of a pileup. I mean, craziness, and working together as a team. And I realized that you don't have to go it alone. I think with our NASA group, that was the really fun key thing about contesting that always scared me before, was that we were the pileup. We were the one trying to funnel it down. And so we had 3 or 4 people on each of the rigs, and we had 2 or 3 people listening and trying to pick out the people calling in. And we weren't afraid to say, hey, the person with, just these 3 numbers, or these 3 letters, come back, that kind of a thing. And so it was really learning how to work together as a team and things like that, and realizing that as you are contesting, you don't have to go it alone. You can have somebody helping you by listening and doing, transcription, and you work as a team in order to make those connections. And then once you get confident enough, you could start contesting on your own. And so it was a great segue to get people in there, including our chief technology officer. We had him come in and sit there, and he didn't have his amateur radio license at the time. And so it was just a blast in order to be able to share that passion and that excitement and that energy with people who may have not been exposed to amateur radio before that.
Being at that pile up side is exciting to deal. I mean, that's one of the things I like to do, contesting from several different stations, but I also enjoy doing special event stations. We do one at the Oshkosh Air Show, and it's a blast to talk to some of these guys. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing there. I was a mechanic during World War II or the Korean War, or some, or I was just in the Air Force as air support for this. And they ask what's around, and it's really good to talk to people that you're actually touching their lives with something to do with it. So those special event stations that you did with NASA on the air is very cool.
Yeah, and it hasn't stopped. I mean, we transferred out here to Denver, and so we're now in Colorado. And I joke that the nearest NASA center to me is the ISS when it goes overhead. But yeah, so I still do get to participate with NASA with for Colorado as their point of contact for ARRL with the ARIS contacts that we have with our students, which we have one coming up in April. And so that's super exciting. And I also get to work with students many, many ways. One, just a couple weeks ago, or last week rather, I was talking to one of our counties out here in Colorado and their 4-H group, and talking to their leadership team about how amateur radio can actually feed into their STEM program that they already do, and how it just supplements that and can, grow the opportunities that we have with, lesson plans, and how it's already in their communities. It's just connecting it to what is already in their field of interest and making that connection. And I think, most people think, oh, FFA or, 4-H, how does that compute? Well, it does. I mean, RFID tags on tracking all of their, equipment or their livestock, including all the, hundreds of chickens that they may have in their chicken coops. Those are all RFID tags, and that's still radio waves. And so once you connect what is already around them to them, then there's this excitement about learning more about it. And agriculture, if anyone knows, it's one of the booming areas for technology. It's just absolutely fantastic. So if we can get these kids young and teach them about these things, it just helps them on the career paths that they already are on. And so we do that. We just did with Broomfield High School this week. We did a fox hunt with their engineering club. It was a blast. And so that was super fun. We've done all sorts of things, but it doesn't ever stop. There's always something on the horizon. And next month we have a large disability conference that we have here in Colorado. That'll be in Monument, and so I'm slated to go and give my little talk and be there for 2 days. So I'm very excited about that, and trying to connect amateur radio to the disability avenues, and not just to say, hey, we're going to go out there to save you, for an emergency preparedness kind of stance, but really, dude, we need you. Please help us. And this is how you can be a part of, really being a part of our community and giving us a leg up. So I can't wait to do that.
A couple of things to interject there. One, for those that are curious, a fox hunt is looking for a transmitter. We get to see a lot of that happen in aviation at the air shows. The Civil Air Patrol, actually, they love it. They'll see an ELT that is broadcasting, and usually it's because somebody forgot to turn it off or accidentally activated it. And you see them running around with these directional antennas trying to find out where the ELT is that's going off. So that is a great search and rescue technique. Uh, but again, we call it a fox hunt. The other thing is, for a lot of people with disabilities, especially those that are homebound, and even those that do not have disabilities. We had the pandemic. People worked from home, shelter in place, those kind of things. It was interesting to see the growth of amateur radio, because when you're stuck at home, your amateur radio becomes your portal to the world, and uh, you can only watch so many series on Netflix or your favorite streaming um, channel, or watch so much news to you're depressed. You want to talk to other people, and amateur radio allows you to talk to other people from all around the world. Now, I know you and I have talked about a couple other things that you're working on, and I thought it was real cool because technology is usually seen as man's world.
No, absolutely not.
I can tell that I just tripped a trigger by your facial
Oh
expression. So
no.
please
Oh no.
take off with it.
No, absolutely not. Technology, I think, in the infancy of technology, yes, there's been women a part of it for ages and ages. It's just they never got the credit, and they never got to be center stage. And I think now is a little bit different, because you're seeing more and more mentors of all genders coming out and being a part of it. I actually was just able to write a nice article for International Women's Day on some influential women here in the amateur radio community and what they're doing in order to, just exposing amateur radio to the world. And it's so remarkably awesome to speak to these women and be able to tell their story. We have one here in northern Colorado where she is a tower climber, a communications tower climber, and she has built her own network. And so it was amazing to talk to Carrie and be able to tell her story and that kind of thing. We have that one of the NASA engineers at NASA Glenn Research Center, Nancy Hall. She is amazing. She's a program manager and engineer out there, and she actually is real active with the Girl Scouts and the YLRL, which is the Young Ladies Radio League, for those that don't know. And so there's a community of people out there, including a bunch of, you know, young women that are doing the POTA activations and things like that. So, I mean, it's just been, it's off the chart. They're just everywhere. And so tech is not just for men. It is definitely for women, and even the women. This is the part that just excites me to no end. It's not just for women that are in tech. So I think initially people that got into amateur radio, a lot of them were already kind of in the tech field. So those golden nuggets that were out there that were network engineers, or computer programmers, or those kind of things. Those rare few that were out there, they really gravitated to amateur radio. But nowadays, you see so many more amateur radio operators that have nothing to do with tech, that are really getting into the STEM field and learning and education and being in this community that is just rewarding all in itself. Like down in Monument here, we have a very large group that is they do all sorts of outings together, and they do all sorts of amateur radio related outings at parks and different things. And they have a lot of meetings that they do educational outreach. And their president is a veterinarian, and she is a female, and she is amazing, and they are amazing. And so everybody, the one thing that I wish I could just say to everybody on this is that there is a place in amateur radio for everyone. Every ability, every background, everything. You are going to find so much rewarding community and togetherness and learning, which is the natural for human beings. That's what we need. We need to keep learning all the time. And this is one place that I will never reach the peak of everything that there is to learn in amateur radio.
I've had Steve Goodgame on here before from the ARRL talking about the STEM programs. It's very interesting in the classrooms. The ones that are most intrigued by amateur radio are the girls in the classroom.
I definitely see that too. When we went up to Broomfield, there was a group of 3 gals that I found very interesting. They had grabbed a little handheld Yagi antenna and their HT unit, and they were out there hunting by themselves. But they didn't want any guys to take it away from them or to show them how to do it. They were going to figure it out, and they were the first ones to find one of the 3 transmitters that we had. And the look on their face when they found it was awesome. And I think it's just because, in years before, in our past, it's only been exposed to young men, and which is amazing for the Boy Scouts and all that they do. But then all of a sudden, when you show it to women and you see that they're just as excited about it, and there's so much to learn, and they want to be, they want to get to the root of the problem and figure things out too. It's the adaptability that they learn. It's, the problem solving. It's working through tough questions and coming to an actual answer that makes you feel victorious. And that doesn't happen with just taking a standardized test. I think, getting out and actually hands-on and getting dirty and getting out there, there's something with it that's just magical.
I got one other tidbit. I'm just curious if you know this, but do you know who developed spread spectrum that is used in today's Wi-Fi technology?
Wasn't that Hedy Lamarr?
Yes, ma'am. A Hollywood actress.
So you talk about double standards, and everybody has a place in amateur radio, and that is point in case.
So I appreciate your time coming on here with me. I hope that I can convince you to either come on, or who knows, help me host a few of these in the future.
I would love to.
It's our goal to have fun and share this wonderful hobby with more people, in talking about how they got into it, what motivates them, what excites them about it, and kind of get away from that stereotype that it's just a bunch of old men talking.
No, but you know what? It's great because it's the connection between all of the generations and all of the genders and all of it's just a very holistic community. And I don't think that it's all of one or all of another. It's just it's what makes us great.
And it's incredible. Go to what we call the trade shows are called ham fests, and you really don't talk about anything career wise. You talk about who you talk to, what country you talk to, what's your farthest contact, how many people did you talk to, and it's amazing the people that you get to talk to.
Yeah, and watching their excitement when they get to tell you their story. And so I think that's the human connection that is behind amateur radio. People think of amateur radio as being a separate and solitary thing, but it's when you guys come together, when we get to the ham fest, when we get to these conventions, when we get to club meetings and people get together, it's that energy and excitement that we're losing into technology today with our cell phones and texting back and forth and everything else. When we come together to share those experiences, how far we've contacted somebody, or oh my gosh, you have no idea, and then you add on the fact that it's all through radio waves, it's magical.
Well, it is interesting. The very first cell phone call was developed by a ham radio operator. And we were actually making phone calls before they microsized it into what they call a cell phone with our VHF and UHF cables. We had what was called an auto patch on the repeaters. So we could wirelessly make a phone call to somebody. And it was that experimentation and things like that that a lot of today's technology that people take for granted or it becomes their lifestyle was developed.
Yeah, it's that's one of the things that really is kind of a cornerstone of amateur radio is the kind of open source adaptability of it, that we're constantly trying to improve things. We're constantly trying to find new ways of doing things, and it's really a test bed of engineering and adaptability and all of that fun stuff. And it's amazing. It's constantly growing. I mean, I think the funnest question when a high schooler asks you, how long does it take you to be proficient in amateur radio? And it's like everyone just laughs. Everyone that's got an amateur radio license just laughs, because you never could be proficient in amateur radio because there's so much to do and there's so many different avenues. It's like, well, if you picked one line, maybe, I could give you an answer, but it's a big ball of wax. So yeah.
You mentioned earlier about ARIS, which is Amateur Radio for International Space Station, and you also mentioned the International Space Station goes over you. One thing that I think a lot of people, while they are NASA savvy and are really into things that are going on in space, I don't think they realize the role that amateur radio plays on the space station.
Absolutely. So amateur radio on the ISS has a long history. Actually, we just hit our 40-year anniversary, and ARIS did a big celebration of it not too long ago, a couple weeks ago. And amateur radio operators have been on the ISS for quite some time. It's actually, NASA, as we all know, is all about redundancy. And they want to make sure that if there was a solar storm that took out communications or things like that, they can have a secondary communications mechanism for them to be able to do that. And amateur radio is a wonderful opportunity for them to do that. And they test that system regularly by having the astronauts that get their license make contact with normal, everyday people with amateur radio license here on the ground. So
wait a minute. You're telling me that the astronauts that are on the shuttle are all licensed hams?
Not all, no. There has to be, I believe they strive for at least two for every mission. And again, that's redundancy. And a lot of our administrators, even at NASA, have had their license and still do. Obviously, a lot of our administrators are past astronauts as well. So it works hand in hand. But yes, a lot of them have made contacts with people here on the earth from all over around the globe, and not just here in the United States, but definitely everywhere. We do with Eris. They do contacts with students and schools. So there's a whole process that you have to go through in order to get that done. But again, that's a global opportunity. So any school around the nation has been able to do that, including here in the Springs. One of the first contacts was with the Air Force Academy, and right here. So it could be an academy, it could be a college, it could be an elementary school. It's all over the place.
So you've really got my curiosity now, because that was a either a rumor or a myth that all astronauts. So another question for you: is it just the United States astronauts that get their ham radio license?
No, not at all. So other agencies that go up in space with us, they have astronauts that can get on the radio, and actually, there's a couple of different call signs. I don't remember them all, but depending upon what nation is using the call sign from the ISS, their call sign is what is being transmitted. So, like JAXA, we have JAXA up there. We have all sorts of different astronauts with ham licenses that do get out and make contacts, and you get a QSL card for making a contact. So I always try to, express to people, it's a 10-minute window, so it's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but it's definitely thrilling to do. And a lot of times I really encourage people to start with CubeSats, chasing the ham sats. And if you can chase a ham sat, it's virtually the same thing. So if you can get those ham sats and you get kind of experience of chasing them, and you get that 10-minute window as it's arcing over, we have some wonderful apps out that you can track the ISS as it goes over, or the ham sats, as they go over. And so you can make those contacts, and it's a blast. And so it's really, really neat. I have been able to ping the ISS and get my QSL card in order to make that connection. We did that last field day. Actually, was one of my first time ever. Been working with NASA for over 15 years, but it was my first time actually hitting the ISS and being able to get our QSL card for the Lockheed Martin club out there in Waterton Canyon, and it was a total blast. But I have not yet spoken to an astronaut. So really, the astronauts only get on in their extracurricular time, which they don't have much time because we keep them pretty busy up there. But some of them on their off time, they definitely do make amateur radio phone calls, and they can talk to their family members, or they can talk to us, or things like that. And so a lot of them do. And so you can see really fun videos out there. One with Kajal Langston. He spoke to little Isabella in New England, and she's 8 years old. I mean, totally adorable, and just fun things. Definitely go out, check them out. And they also do story times that they do stories from the ISS. And so one of them that's out is about Ada Lovelace, and it's an amateur radio story. So go check that out too. It's a lot of fun.
You mentioned about talking to an astronaut. You talked about pinging the ISS. Talked about schedules for schools. You've talked about their downtime. The one thing that you didn't cover yet about it, and it's been an intriguing one for me, is they will have special events where they will do commemorative type communications, where you can just receive the signal and then print it out, and they will do what we call slow scan TV. And what it basically is a one-way broadcast of an image. It could be an image from space, it could be an electronic QSL card, which a QSL card is a confirmation of the communications. Gosh, I remember seeing on social media posts that the Russian cosmonauts were transmitting commemorative some type of commemorative image for their space program as well. And I know ham radio operators were just tracking a Japanese item that was, or I don't know if it was a rover or if it was just a pad that landed that was sending out what we call telemetry information from the moon. So there is a lot of fun things that ham radio operators or even just non-ham radio operators can do just with receiving the signals. So you don't have to be all hammed up to do some of these things. Alrighty, so I think it's time to wrap up.